How you going, YouTube, and welcome to another episode of the Resto Shed. So continuing on from the last video on this car, obviously I did the rear quarters and the wheel arches and all that jazz. Now I'm working on the doors, because obviously I'm working my way forward to the front half of the car and I've already done the back half. So as you can probably tell, there's quite a bit going on these doors. There's quite a bit of bog and old repairs and stuff that's just not up to scratch for the rest of the car and how I want it. So obviously getting all of that out and seeing what we're working with. So after a bit of a paint strip and then just going over it with the clean and strip disc on the buff, this is kind of what we're left with. So nothing too pretty on this one. This door here was probably the worst, mainly just because of some old accident damage and some pretty average repairs. This one has had a horrendous patch welded into it, and that had like over 10 mil of bog in it. But yeah, this back door, it was actually a part of the accident damage that was done on the quarter panel, but it actually really wasn't that bad. So I didn't do a whole lot of filming, just needed a bit of pulling, a little bit of shrinking just to get the sort of ballooning out of the panel. And it was pretty well there, ready for a little bit of rust repair. So I didn't do any filming of the making of this rust repair section just because it was pretty basic. It was just, a couple of bends and a bit of shrinkage, straight sharing and run it through the English wheel, that kind of thing. Inside, obviously got a bit of a clean up, some rust converter and then some rust protection paint. And then it was basically ready to, overlap, cut it and tack it in. This front door on the other hand, it was a lot of work. Just trying to get this one, up to a better standard. Ideally, if I could have gotten a door skin for this one, I would have done that, but they're a 12-month wait at the best of times for front door skins for these cars. So I kind of just worked with what I got on a bit of a time schedule sort of deal on this car. So basically just trying to find a sort of happy medium between a good repair and also a quick repair, but something that's going to last. You just might not look 100% pretty in the bare metal flesh. Not saying that it was a bad repair, but a new door skin probably would have been the way to go. But like I said, with the time constraints that we've got, probably wouldn't have worked out for this one. I suppose you probably argue, get another door. Well, 9 times out of 10, sometimes when you get a better door, they're usually not better. Probably just as bad as the one that you're working on. Sometimes it's better to deal with the devil that you know than the one that you don't know. I suppose as the saying goes. But as you can see, it's coming along. There was a few holes around this front edge, so obviously doing my best to mig those up. I didn't want to go cutting a patch out of that because as soon as you do something like that in the middle of the door, it all kind of turns to shit. So tried my best filling up those holes with a bit of MIG weld, and that's sort of, as you can see, it's getting there. It's not 100% perfect, but it's definitely getting there. So another reason why I wanted to keep this door was because it was still the original door to this car, and 9 times out of 10, that's probably the best fit to the car. So if you go and get a door off, another body or something, sometimes it won't fit as good as what the original door will, despite the dents and the rust and stuff. So sometimes it's better to work with what you got, rather than try and chase the elusive rust-free door or whatever. But anyway, enough about that. So as you can see, with a bit of pulling, bit of shrinking, bit of welding, that top half of the door is coming up not too bad. I reused the template off these other Sunburst Gold HQ on this one, so I can kind of dial in those lines a little bit closer to where they're supposed to be. And now what I'm working on is the panel-to-panel alignment between the front door and the back door. And basically what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to get, I don't want any misalignments between the panel, because this thing will get panel-to-panel blocked. From the filler work to the polyester all up to paint. And basically what that will do is that will make the car look like it's all been cut out of one piece of steel. And the only difference between the front door and the back door will be the gap in between the two. So ideally that's the look that you want. It is pretty hard to achieve, but with a bit of work, you can get there. So a lot of this stuff I probably could be using hammer and dolly. As you can see in the video, I'm using my flipper or slapper, whatever you want to call it, or just using the dolly on the inside of the door, but just mainly for speed. So I'm not opening and closing the door 50 times in a minute. I'm kind of just switching between the dent puller that I've got and my shrinking disc, just trying to mow down some of those highs and, put some tension back into the panel, because there was quite a bit of oil canning in this door. But, a lot of that was mainly due to because of how out of shape it was. There was like 50 million dents in this door, and yeah, they all had to be, worked out before I could start the rust repair. So that's kind of the first stage of these doors done. So obviously I've straightened it out, I've tacked in my lower section on the back door, still got the front section to do on the rust side of things. And I've just run over the cleaner strip disc to make it look a bit pretty. And yeah, it's not looking too bad. For what it was a couple minutes ago, looks pretty good. Now, unfortunately, when I was hammering around the back edge of this door, I uncovered a few sins. So someone's waxed some filler in this, and there was a bit of a patch in the lower corner, as you can see, and the top half was basically just full of weld, and all in between that was rust holes and pitting and whatnot. So obviously got to do something about that. So obviously that's not what we want, so out come the door skin pliers, which are just nail pliers that I've sort of fashioned into a tool that kind of works. Basically what that does is it grips the back edge of the door skin, and the side that doesn't have the slot cut into it goes underneath the hemmed edge, and it pulls it up just a little bit, and then you just basically work it up until it's more or less at a 90-degree bend, effectively unskinning the door skin. I'm pretty sure I have done a video on this tool before, or it's made an appearance one way or the other. But yeah, it's just like a cheap tool that I've sort of just fashioned into something that kind of works. As you can see, starting to get that lip up just a little bit. Yeah, it's a pretty tricky thing to do, but it's one of those things. Once you've sort of done them a few times, you sort of get the hang of it. And yeah, then it's on with the tape template, transfer it to steel, cut it out. Obviously all of that in there needed to be cleaned up. So obviously gave it a good clean back, wire wheeled it, chucked on some Worth rust converter, and then put on some rust protection paint. So that section's just made out a bit of 1mm tin, obviously pub rod steel, and yeah, it's just basically a bit of a 90-degree folding. I did bend it by hand just because there is quite a bit of shape into it. Ran it through the shrinker, and yeah, basically just hammered and dollied it until it fit. It's a bit of a pig shape, but yeah, it's come up alright in the end, just because there's a lot of awkward curves and stuff like that. You can kind of blend it in pretty nicely with the rest of the door. And yeah, then obviously a bit of weld through primer, hammer the door edge back over, and bob to your auntie. So now it's on with the lower door skin. So this one, obviously tape template, got my bit of steel, folded that little 10mm lip, or 8mm lip, whatever it is, and then run it through the English wheel. Basically got it so it was pretty well fitting over the top of the existing door skin, because obviously that was pretty straight. And then Cleco it on, and then basically turn the edges over. So once the patch panel was fitting, it was then time to obviously chop the rest of the lower skin off, clean up inside the door, and then tack that new section on. Now I do normally run a bar across the door, basically just to hold its shape, but I didn't on these two doors just because I'm an idiot, and I thought, oh yeah, I'll be right. And yeah, that screwed me up in the long run, but is what it is. Sorted it out in the end, as you can probably see if you watch the end of the video. So with the doors all tacked up and 95% into place, it was then time to get them ready to basically weld out the door skins. Covering up the car. I hate cars that are full of grinding dust and that sort of stuff, so cover them up when you're not working on them, and it's on with some welding. So there's a bit of MIG footage there for you MIG aficionados. Something like this, I'll normally just, tacks one at a time, about 4 fingers apart, work one side of the panel to the other, and do that until it's basically pretty well filled up, and yeah, welded solid. There you go. So that's the finish there without any panel beating done to it. It's basically just ground up and then finish off with a bit of a cleaning strip disc. This is just another little rust repair section that I needed to do while the door was off. So this is everyone's favourite job, hammering over door skin sections. These suck, I hate doing them. It's not that I can't do them and I can't do them well, it's just, my wrist is a bit buggered up, so it takes a little bit of time. You might notice I'm switching between hammers a little bit. One of them is actually not a door skin hammer, but it's got a little bit more weight to it, so I find it sort of, you don't have to really work as hard to use it to tip an edge over, but it come up pretty well in the end. Now, I've tried to get this through to a lot of the people who watch my channel that a lot of the times when you weld something, a lot of the really bad distortion and, all that sort of stuff, a lot of it's coming from your panel fitment. So if you can have your panel fitting up really nice, you can basically just weld it, obviously one tack at a time. Don't pump a whole lot of heat into it, get a good weld on it. But if you can do that, usually it'll blend in pretty nicely with the rest of the door skin. It's all mainly to do with your panel fitment. So as you can probably tell, this door gave me, hell of a lot of fun. It did start oil canning pretty bad, and it probably dropped down, I think somewhere between 5 and 8 mil. So a lot of it was just dolling it back out into shape, stretching it back to where it needs to be, and then finding basically where to shrink it, and a lot of working out. I got it pretty close in the end, but I was still sort of chasing an oil canning issue, so I ended up switching to the carbon shrinking, and it just made it a little bit more manageable. And as you can see, like, the door won't need a whole lot of filler in it. I think probably maybe the deepest spot is maybe a mil and a half, so not a whole lot at all. At the end of the day, this car will get skim coated. Now the icing on the cake for this door was that it decided it wanted to jam up and not open for me. So I basically had to take the whole front off the car, unbolt the door hinges off the shell, and then wind out the striker from inside the door just so I can get the door off and finish the rust repairs on the inside. So that one was a pretty basic shape as well. Obviously put a couple of folds, run it through the stretcher, and that's how that one come up. And then it was time for a bit of rust converter. Obviously blew it all into the seams as best as I could, and then chuck on some rust protection paint. Now I always try and talk about best practice. Best practice is, obviously pull the door skin off, have the whole frame and stuff blasted, paint up all inside your door skin once it's been rust repaired, and basically refit it. Due to time constraints, that wasn't really a possibility with this car, because that takes months, not weeks. So basically try and flood the door out the best I can with some rust converter, and then isolate the rust, seal up the rust converter and whatnot with a bit of that rust protection paint. And that's just an enamel paint. I thin it down with a bit of acetone, just so I can basically rotate the door, get it to seep into the seams. And it's not 100% foolproof. At the end of the day, the doors are made out of steel, they're going to rust at some point. But my aim was to basically just slow it down and make it last as long as possible. And like I keep saying, with the time constraints, I've found that's probably the best way to deal with what we're dealing with on this car. But anyway, this back door had a bit of an average patch panel. It was pretty warped, and it kind of sunk that body line in quite a fair way. So I did my best to sort of pull that out. There was a few little spots where I just had to MIG up, and I ended up just basically MIGging a line onto that door, just so when it comes time to fitting my patch panel, as it was pretty close to that body line, I just wanted to give it a little bit of strength, give it something so I can weld to that's a little bit thicker than the door skin. And it came up alright in the end. It wasn't 100% perfect, but it was definitely a lot better than what it was. So I ended up starting by chiseling sort of that sort of flange into the panel, and basically what that did is that stretched the edge of the patch, because obviously it's kind of got a bit of a convex shape to it, and then did the rest of the turning over with the pliers, and then finished off hammer and dolly, and then it was ready for a little bit of shrinking across that edge. Now a patch panel like this, even though it is a little bit small, there is quite a bit going on. Obviously it's kind of curved, a few different ways. The body lines, to make your door gap is obviously curved as well. It's not a straight line. So that one obviously has to be turned by hand. And then, you obviously got to match the profile of the door as well. I don't know if you can see it in the time lapse, but I've actually got a bit of cardboard in my hand, and that has got the profile of the door edge on it. And that basically just allows me to, stand at the shrinker stretcher and not have to walk, backwards and forwards to the car to check it on the doors. So it just makes things a little bit quicker. But anyway, after I was pretty happy with the patch, I ended up just trimming off that edge so I can sit my fabricated patch panel, basically where I need it to be, so I can have a nice gap. Clamp it on, clear cut, and then trim back what I don't need and start fitting my patch panel. So I generally mark around the patch panel with big fat texter and then run around it with a scribe. I find that's usually how you get sort of the best gap or the best fitment between your two panels. This one was a little bit tricky because there was a few curves and stuff like that to go around, so I ended up getting the little carbide bit on the die grinder. Sort of did the best I can with that, and it came up pretty well in the end. Obviously got a rust converted, and then putting a little bit of paint on the inside of the door and on the patch panel. So there you go, that's a little bit of what I cut out, and that's my replacement panel. It's ready for a bit of fitting up. Obviously I've got a few little tabs where I've got it clear code, obviously got to chop them out, and basically just press it and tack it and whatnot. This one I did have a little bit of problem with it sinking in, and that's mainly because it's a vertical joint. Obviously I could have moved the patch panel. I didn't need to go that far into the door, but the reason why I did that was because I wanted to have access to the backside of the weld. Now, a lot of the problems I see people having is they will try and make their patch panel small, and what they'll do is they'll totally alienate themselves to having access to the backside of the weld, so they can't stretch the weld back out. So sometimes it's better to do a larger patch panel than a smaller patch panel. It might make sense to some people. I'll just cut the small little square out and MIG it in, it'll be fine. But then they realise that they don't have anything to get into the backside of the panel, so they can't hammer out their distortion or fix anything that they need to fix. So after that one was all tacked in, it was then time to tackle the lower door skin. So as you can see, I've got my bar tacked across the door, and that just basically helps hold the door skin straight. There's my patch panel, a little bit higher than the last one, and then it was time to tackle the inside rust repairs. Now this section I actually just formed it straight over the top of what was already there. A lot of it was mainly just a little square patch and some pitting that I wanted to get rid of. Just wasn't quite up to my standard. So yeah, basically did what I could with it, cleaned up inside the door, painted it all up, and then it was time to start fitting my patch panel. So not fully welding this one just yet, just putting quite a lot of tacks on it just so I can sort of finalise the shape after it's all tacked in. And it's time to sort of fit it back on the car and focus my attention on the front door, which, as you can probably guess, will need quite a lot of work. So this front door's had quite a bit of work redone to it. Now some of it's, I could live with it, it wasn't too bad, but the skin on it was absolutely stuffed. Like, we're talking, to get the thing straight you would have need like 15 mil of block, and obviously that's not what we want. So I ended up making a lower door skin patch for this one. Obviously starting off with the paper template, transfer it to steel, and basically same process as the other three doors, just a larger patch panel. So you're probably wondering what I'm doing with the slide hammer and obviously attaching it to the door skin. Because this door had such a big low spot, it was actually affecting the top half of the skin and where I was going to be joining my patch panel. So using the lower half of the skin as a bit of a sacrificial, weld that on it, slide it out, and it brings the panel out to where it pretty much needs to be. And as you can see, it's now straight. Unfortunately, I didn't get any footage of it when it had a big low spot in it, but yeah, it was quite bad. So with my door skin fabrication, I basically started off with the bottom fold and the back edge of the fold, and then I basically got it to a point where I could sit that over the top of the existing door skin, and marked it out, and then obviously trimmed all that off and exposed the mess that was underneath. So quickest way to get a door skin off is to grind the edges off, and I'm just using a flat disc on that. Obviously I'm not going to use this panel, so it doesn't matter if I rack it a little bit. All I want to do is preserve the frame, because obviously that's the bit I want to keep. Now this door's had quite a bit of work done to the frame, and look, it's not 100% fantastic, but it really wasn't worth chopping out and redoing, because I mean, you know, it was all penetrated and all that other stuff. The worst thing about it was there was no rust protection, so it wasn't really going to last. But anyway, back on with the door skin. So tipping that edge, obviously I just marked it out on the frame and then started, you know, bending up that little lip with the locking pliers, and then finished off hammer and dolly, and you know, it got it pretty close. Obviously doing this kind of stuff, it's always going to change the face of the skin just a little bit. As you can see, it's kind of made it bow up a little bit, you know, put a little bit of curve in it, but then that's where the shrinker stretcher comes in. So it needed a little bit of shrinking on that edge. Anyone who's ever done a great big long panel like this will know how awkward that is, especially when you have to do it, you know, up over your shoulder, because, you know, obviously if it goes the other way, it's going to be touching on the floor. But yeah, doesn't matter. Didn't really need a whole lot to sort of straighten that edge up, and yeah, come around pretty well in the end. So although I did put a little bit more extra shape into across the length of this skin, I didn't actually end up putting enough in. I had a little bit of trouble once I'd actually fitted the door skin to the door, and you know, had it all panel to panel alignment between the front of the back door and the back of the guard. I did end up having to hammer and dolly and pull it a little bit, but you know, it is what it is. You know, sometimes you have to do what you have to do. Obviously it's nice to be able to have, you know, a panel straight off the English wheel. You know, there's really no defects in the panel, but you know, it's not always the case by the time it's welded in and whatnot. So that's the frame all finished off, and you know, the rust protection applied to the door skin. So it came up pretty well on the inside there. Pretty happy with that. And it was time to basically hammer over the door skin, tack it all up, and see how it fits. Another little issue with this car is because it has been damaged, the pillar was actually bent in a little bit. Now I thought it was mainly just, you know, a visual damage, but yeah, I'd actually run out of adjustment on the door, so I ended up having to get a little bit creative with a junk hinge, word a bit of angle on it, and yeah, basically just used the slide hammer on that, the big slide hammer, pulled it out straight, and yeah, it come up a lot nicer. The door fit up really nice. Sort of corrected some of my gaps that I was a little bit suspicious of, and yeah, it even made the door shut nicer. So obviously it needed it. Wasn't something I thought it was going to need, but you know, it did. The downside of that is it really shown how bent up that seal panel was. But yeah, I will get to that into another video. But yeah. Anyway, now it's time to start welding out all the joints. Now that I'm sort of happy with all the fitment of everything. Obviously quite a bit of welding on this side, more than the other side anyway. But yeah, it comes along pretty well. Obviously I had to spend quite a bit of time hammering out that distortion. Like I say, vertical joints, they always suck. But you know, I got there in the end with it. The body line did sort of, you know, it was a little bit round, but I mean, it's, you know, it is what it is. It wasn't too bad, but yeah, it could have been a little bit better in my opinion, but that's just my opinion. But anyway, after that one was done, it was then time to weld the long join across the length of the skin. I like to do that off the car, I just find it a little bit more manageable, you know, a bit more comfortable. You don't have to be sitting on the ground or getting covered in welds, you know, everything's sort of done, you know, below you. That one came up pretty well, and it was time to do the front. Obviously I didn't do much filming of that one. Yeah, then it was basically, after they were welded up, time to straighten the panels out, a little bit of shrinking, a bit of pulling, that kind of thing. Same sort of stuff as what I did on that front passenger side door. I didn't really see much sense in, you know, basically refilming all of the same stuff. But yeah. Anyway, then it was time to rust proof the doors. So hopefully they last quite a long time. Yeah, they came out pretty well. I was pretty happy with them. Obviously I finished it off with a little bit of deoxidine just to sort of hold off the surface rust, and it was time for some beauty shots. So chucked the big wheels back on. Obviously this would have been the same time I took the photo for the thumbnail, that kind of thing. Yeah. Anyway, I was pretty happy with it. Came out pretty well. Happy with how everything's sort of fitting up. It's a lot better than what it was. Obviously got the panels rust free, a lot straighter, panel to panel fitment's pretty good. Obviously I'll go through everything once the rest of the car's sort of all at this stage, fine tune everything a little bit more, and yeah. Anyway, so this is going to be the next video. So I've got the sill panels to sort out. The lower sections of the guards are a bit kicked out, and this one, there's nowhere near close to fitting. Bit of craziness going on the cow panel. The guard to nose cone gaps. Obviously the nose cone and the rad support's aftermarket, so I've got to deal with them. Yeah, it's quite a bit going on. Obviously a bit of damage on the nose cone as well that I've got to sort out. Yeah, aftermarket fitment's usually not that great. Not terrible, but not that great. But yeah, anyway, it just gives you a little bit of an insight on what's going to happen. This car panel's got a little bit of something going on in that corner, so I might have to investigate on that. Obviously gaps are pretty crap on the guards to the car panel, so I have to sort them out. And yeah, then this fella, so the sill panel's all punched in, so I have to do something about that. Yeah, anyway, thanks for watching guys, I'll see you in the next one.